Hello, everyone. Nice to meet you again. I'll talk about data knowledge today in the critical thinking skills session. It'll be relatively short, but I think it's important to emphasize the data, which is the foundation of all our thinking. Uh, Data sits at the bottom of the data information knowledge triangle, or I talked about it a little bit before, but I'd just like to elaborate on each one of the items here. So, data uh, serves as the initial uh, fundamental uh, piece of collection that you need to collect. And it's really, without the collection, it's just disorganized as chaos. Initial digits are um, just there in terms of zeros and ones on the computer screen. It could be um, a newspaper clip, a video, could be facts or figures. That somebody said something, and that's just sort of a yet not yet an information because it awaits your collection. So it's at the bottom and it's unorganized. So it tells you nothing, but you are the one that makes something out of that nothing. Obviously there is this initial piece of data or factum or factoid that you need to collect. Once you collected that, you start structuring, processing, and systematizing it in some sort of a more meaningful way. And that is what's called information. And it's organized data, but it's not all, because you need to verify it and you need to make sure that verification is transparent. And you need to understand the process of verification of that data. Once you kind of analyzed it, that data through analysis and removal on unwanted information and structure of information and what is more truthful or not, demonstrates that this has been verified information. And you can assume that the information that you use best describes the situation. And that's actually the basis of your wise decisions. It's the basis of any decision, is to actually come back to the data that has been turned into information, has been verified and structured. What is data? And data is not very easy actually to distinguish from other pieces. I mean, the fact, what can you say, a fact is kind of data because something happened. Okay, it's data, but can you actually make some judgment on that? It is not very easy to discern that fact from an opinion. You could say, well, yesterday it rained, may be a fact, but it is an opinion, and it becomes a fact until you actually check the validity of all the sources that also subscribe to the fact. Sorry for saying that there was rain yesterday. A single person's opinion is not a fact, so it's not data. Any confusion that arises when opinion is presented as fact. So newspaper information, newspaper article is not necessarily a clear data, is not a fact, because you don't know what the biases people actually attach to the piece of information they supplied. So you can't collect this, or you can say collect that as data. That's another thing. It's possible to collect this as data, but assume it's unorganized. You can even collect that as information. You can collect opinions too. Say opinions are data. Opinions are data. Facts are data. Figures are data. Um, any sort of information is data. Once you actually start collecting it, it becomes information that is relevant for you. It's not still another step till actually analyzing that. So, other definitions say that data is something that is a fact that is yet out of context. It have no meaning. And it's difficult to understand. It's just pieces of, in a way, digits or letters on a paper. They're often referred as raw. You can say in raw data on your screen. It's like zeros and ones on a computer. So, data and fact could be used interchangeably. Data is actually a plural, and you would say datum for singular, although you don't really see that. It's not really correct to use data as a singular, but that is difficult. People would say data is available. However, it's probably to say data are available. I'm not really, in the English language police here, but it is important to understand that data is a plurality. Okay. And all of these things can be clarified as data, and different numbers, observations, measurements, graphs, and all sorts of stuff. So when people come to you with graphs and all sorts of bits and pieces, is still not qualified information. In order to qualify that as information, you need to make sure that this information becomes data in context, with relevant not just to you but few more people at a period of time. Yeah. So, for example, if you collected that data and said, well, now I could say that, this graph means that this graph is valid. You can also say that if X happened, then Y happened, then Z happened, and let me present them in logical order. So I would say that Mesozoic consisted of Triassic, Jurassic, and Cretaceous periods, and then information is sorted about those periods. Data from those periods is sorted, say ages on a rock. So then the ages on the rock that have been measured in a lab as simple data become an information when put on a graph. So it is more than a data in context. You must have relevance and a time frame for it. Yeah. So actually, that geological time scale I'm talking to you about is actually a great example. At least for me, it is a good example. Or timetable of the trains. Without a context, this is just a piece of data. However, once you put the schedules in context, saying that the trains arrive each hour and put it on, then there is an information for you, and it has relevance. If you just stick that piece of information, say timetables on a London train station, and have somebody in South Africa read it, it just basically has no relevance and therefore is not information. Right, but information is not being absorbed. It is not knowledge. So knowledge is a more difficult process. Now you've kind of climbed up on the pyramid a little bit more. So you could say it is a cognition of the fact, knowing something. So you know something, you have familiarity with it, and understand it. So you're aware of it, understand it, and actually appreciate that there's you kind of analyze the truth of the fact. So the other definition of knowledge is information has been retained through the process of learning it. So knowledge necessitates learning. So you can learn it by experience, you can learn it in a class, you can learn it through other methods, in study and just being aware of it and sort of comprehend it fully. So that only through comprehension of full information, sort of internalizing it, you can call it knowledge. So you know these facts, you learn skills, or you understand objects. Knowledge is not yet wisdom, because only the knowledge would lead to wisdom, and wisdom in my mind is a process of making wise decisions from the knowledge that you've gained. Yeah, so knowledge is only one step. So you kind of climb in on pyramid a little bit more again. Yeah. So knowledge is not always codified. People say tacit or implicit knowledge, which sort of what you retain in your mind. It's kind of unwritten knowledge from memory, or knowledge of basic social rules and codes or know-hows, and it's a little bit difficult to retain because it only sits in your brain. You have to communicate it all the time, and it's usually only available to you because you remember it, you understand it, but it's not available to others if you don't understand it. Or maybe there's some sort of an implicit knowledge of some kind of unwritten codes. I mean, usually they say codes of honor or societal moral behaviors that are written in human psyche. It isn't easy to transfer to others and disseminate to others. Maybe you do it through very conscious period of learning it through your life, yeah. But it's not it's not something that is easily transferable. Once it becomes explicit, documented, I mean, that's why the modern civilization is doing it so well, because through tasks, procedures, reports, and sort of the things, you are actually able to qualify that knowledge becomes transferable. That's sort of helpful for mankind, and then you learn it. So that's how most of the sciences are transferred. The sciences are not implicit, they are explicit. However, human behavior and social codes are implicit. So you can't really you can't really say one which way is the better. It's just the different ways and different types of learning, and therefore there's different types of knowledge. Now, you need to be able to transfer knowledge to others. And when you transfer knowledge to others, you're necessarily interpreting it. So say somebody created knowledge, and that's transferred through books or classes. When you in the process of this transference of knowledge, you'd have to interpret it, and that's sort of an act of explaining. And when you explain something and you understand it, therefore you necessarily frame it in your own way. You cannot really free of complete sort of internal bias in terms of how you reframe some piece of knowledge. So by necessarily transferring it, you actually have an interpretation. It's quite an important for a critical thinker to understand that somebody presenting a knowledge, unless it's written from a book, completely sort of, uh, complete verbiage there included. Therefore, these people are probably interpreting it. Yeah, that's why the translator is really called an interpreter, because they're explaining that people don't understand. When they process explain, they don't really do it letter for letter. They actually create an interpretation in their own way. So, if you come back to the this kind of data information triangle, you can also present it in sort of a data information knowledge cycle, which is the cycle that forms from data to data. And then you kind of start with the data, making that in context, and then you assign meaning to it. Yeah. Once the meaning of the data becomes in context, then it is an information. And the information is only becomes really important information, relevant information, when it is actually timely or it plays. And I gave you a great example of a London train timetable in South Africa. So it really becomes important once you actually on a train and listen to it. Otherwise, it's information is not relevant. And relevant information is basically can be thrown back into the data bucket. And then eventually the relevance and the context give you a knowledge that you retain. So once you get the knowledge, you repeat it through the experience, and then you gain that knowledge more and more. And then you sort of say, well, I learned that, so that means I need to gather more data. And then you come back and gather more data. So it's kind of a circular thing. But if we come back to the triangle, just wanted to make sure we finish with the triangle. I'd say it is important to make sure that we can climb up, but also constantly understand our data sources. And as we go through our understanding of critical thinker and its qualities or her qualities, it will become important why we always have to come back to the original source, which is data. Thank you.